Blog Talk Radio.
Hoor jy die magtige dreuning? Oor die veld kom dit wyd gesweef. Die lied van 'n volk se ontwaking, wat harte laat sidder en beef.
Ek smoeg vir die vrese waarmee ons moet lewe, vir guns en vir moord en vir rape. Ek smoeg vir die bad news, vir Zuma en sy views, van ons op TV moet kyk. Ek wil nie meer hoor hoe ons tieners begrawe, oor niemand hul steur aan die wet. Ek wil nie meer lees van affirmative action, of beklei om te hou wat ek het. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers tot plesie en 'n tellery, wat lief sing en skryf en stry, voor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. Ek stiek vir Malema, sy leuns en sy sê maar, ons hou maar ons mond en betaal. Ons kruip weg in kampe, word blind vir die rampe, en bid dat die Heer ons kom haal. Daar's Winnie Mandela, wat mense verbrand het, maar nou wil sy huil in haar hand. Die staatskas is leeg en die ANC jeug saai verwoesting en pyn deur ons land. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers tot plesie en 'n tellery, wat lief sing en skryf en stry, voor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. Het betaal vir die grond, waar sy kinders se kinders kan bly. Maar sy huis en sy lande is nou in die hande van die vyand teen wie hy moes stry. Ons kinders verstaan nie, waar kom al vandaan nie, hul erfenis is uitgewis. Geen volkslied of vlag nie, en geen erewag nie, vir die helde wat daar nie meer is. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers tot plesie en 'n tellery, wat lief sing en skryf en stry, voor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers tot plesie en 'n tellery, wat lief sing en skryf en stry, voor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. En ons reg om hier te kan bly.
You're listening to Radio Free South Africa with Corinne Smith on ResolutionRadio.com. Call in to listen now at 607-203-5423. That's 607-203-5423.
Welcome to Radio Free South Africa. It is so funny for me to say, this is Karen Smith, and your host tonight is Schalk from Merwe. I'd just like to say that our intro song, as always, is a song by a wonderful South African singer, patriot, and activist, Sunette Bridges. The song basically says that we've had enough of the rape, enough of the politics, enough of the murders, enough of our culture and our people and our statues being destroyed. And she's calling for a new leader to help the white South Africans, the few remaining ones, to get out of this pickle that they have found themselves in. With no further ado, good evening, Schalk.
Good evening, Karen. How are you tonight?
I'm great, thank you, from a very, very cold Texas.
Yeah, fortunately we don't have the cold yet. Our winter is still coming, but yeah, I've read about the icy weather across the whole of the US, I believe.
We luckily didn't get it half as bad. We haven't had the snow and the ice that they've had, but we have got icy cold winds coming down from the north, and we went from 72 degrees on Sunday to about 40 degrees today, and tomorrow we're going to have 31, which is just above freezing. So it's the weirdest weather in the entire world.
Gosh, so it's a drop by about 40 degrees Fahrenheit that you had in a couple of days. Yeah. That's terrible.
Yeah. Eh? It is, because your body just can't adjust to it. It's the most amazing thing. So don't tell me about global warming, because I don't believe it for 1 minute.
Yeah, we have global warming that's now extremely cold, and we have. I read earlier today the North Pole, the magnetic North Pole is now shifting into Russia. So we have all these very strange things happening, and we don't know. We can't explain them. But yeah, it's a crazy world out there. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Thanks,
world.
God.
The world, as we know, has gone mad.
Yes, South Africa getting more and more crazy, and all kinds of weird things happening after New Year. It seems as if 2019, I said 2018 was the year of the devil, but I think 2019 is going to turn out to be the year of the devil. We've had the strangest things going on in South Africa once again. Sometimes when I speak to you and to other international hosts, it's as if I'm trying to convince you of nonsensical things, of us living in a twilight zone. It's not the truth that I'm telling. But in South Africa, it seems to me that our truth is way more unexplainable than any fiction could ever be. So if I may I kick off and start explaining to you what happened the following or the last week in South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely, Schalk. The new normal in South Africa is soon going to become the new normal for the rest of the world. So if they think you're talking nonsense now, just wait until it hits their own country, because they've got a hell of a shock coming.
Yes, it's coming. It's coming. As we all say on these shows, we are about 10 to 15 years ahead of the world. If you want to see what's going to happen in the US, it's very easy. Just look at South Africa about 10 years, 15 years back.
Yeah, but
anyhow, Scott, we had a very interesting incident the last week. At the school in South Africa, Driehoek Triangle in South Africa, Driehoek Law School. It's a primary school in South Africa. We had a terrible accident where a walkover of the school, it actually broke down and it fell on certain students. I think they were also students on top of the walkway, and now the children that were killed, the students that were killed, were white kids. And as anything and everything in South Africa, after this happened and it went onto the news, all of a sudden it became a political play ball, and it became for the BLF. I will explain to the listeners again with the BLF is it became a mechanism to hammer the white population, to say to the white population, but yes, it's because of all your sins. It's now some kind of it's because of what you did to our ancestors. It's you actually deserve that this now happened, and it became a huge media outcry and the furor as usually with these things. And what's shocking up to now for me is it's actually a national crisis. School children died in an accident, a freak accident, and usually you would have at least the president going on national radio or national television and just simply giving you some sympathy to that. We haven't had that even at this point in time. Ramaphosa is all quiet on this. There was also a visit by the local minister, the Sufi, to the school, but the president himself or even the minister of education did not visit the scene of the accident and speak to the the victims and those left behind. So it's terrible for us as white South Africans to see that even tragic deaths like this is used as political play balls, and then we're left with a very unsympathetic government to what's happening here. If these were school kids in the middle of Soweto, I'm very sure we would have had a huge reaction from government to solve the problem and to go to the scene of the accident and all these things. But we haven't seen that in this instance.
No, and they will rush to the scene of some supposed white crime, like the court case against those people we talked about last week. I mean, they'll rush to that scene and be seen all over TV and all over the radio and having their say about how bad we are. But they were terrible comments about they can't feel sympathetic for the children and whatever. I just can't believe it. I can't feel no sympathy for white children. I can't understand that at all, because you speak to anybody, they love their children. They love children. And yet these people don't seem to have the slightest amount of sympathy.
Yes, because Blackland First, now once again I just want to recap that for the listener. Blackland First, it's a political party in South Africa, way left. It's also black nationalist. Their formal response to this was, we can't feel any sympathy because it's white children. And then they went further to actually create a narrative, but it's a punishment, as I said. It's because of the sins of your forefathers now and your ancestors that this is now happening. It's been visited as a punishment on your children. Now, how sick is that? How sick is that? I can't believe that I'm hearing these things. We're living in the 21st century, but we're hearing this in South Africa. Now, just to also indicate to you that it's not us being right-wing or conservative South Africans or white South Africans now going on air and slamming this. The few days after that, we saw even black leaders coming out and saying, "But BLF, this is not the way to do it. It's unacceptable." And the South African Human Rights Commission, which is usually very quiet on these things, they even came out and they slammed BLF. So the outcry in South Africa is not only from white South Africans saying, "Yeah, but we victims again." This narrative sometimes created in foreign media that we are trying to shout victim or cry victim. It was actually also recognized by black leaders in South Africa and the Human Rights Commission to say, "But this is unacceptable. You can't," and say that it's punishment for previous sins and so forth. So it's very interesting, the whole I would say the outpour even from those quarters that usually you won't see this. So Karen, maybe our show and maybe a lot of other things happening in South Africa is turning people a little bit to the right side again. I don't know if I'm reading this incorrectly.
Well, one can only hope so, but I have introduced you to a number of my show host friends recently, and really the consensus is that people are waking up. People are, because of, and not just the ANC government, governments throughout the world have become so left-leaning and so socialist and so anti the people that they are supposed to govern on behalf of. They're supposed to run the country on behalf of the inhabitants, but they have become so divorced from the people that the people are getting mad, and they're beginning to wake up through sheer anger, I think. And so shows like ours and the many that we've been on are attracting more and more attention because people really distrust the mainstream media. They are seeing the lies that they're telling them, and so on. And so I think that our efforts are finally making a small dent, which is the best that we can hope for.
Yes, definitely. Karen, and then I want to also introduce somebody else to the show tonight. Now, I have a legal background, and of course you're in journalism, so we can give a certain point of view to our listeners, but I think because we're dealing here with things involving structural engineering, the collapse of a building, these things, it's better to have an actual expert to come and explain to us what's going on. For the very simple reason, even amongst the white population in South Africa and the media and everybody, people are running around with the most crazy stories and even conspiracy theories as to why this happened, whether this was a freak accident, whether it could have been prevented, all these things. And we are not technical. But we have an engineer, actually. He wants to stay anonymous. Like many instances in South Africa, we can't really speak out because it can affect our work and it can affect our employment. And he's willing to speak to us tonight, but he wants to remain anonymous. We're going to call him Mr. E. And maybe he can tell us a little bit more about the technical issues of this. So I'm going to introduce him now. I'm going to ask Mr. E to come on and explain to us just his own background so that we can establish that he's an actual expert relating to engineering. So he can give us the technical know-how of what happened here and the background to this all. Good evening, Mr. E.
Good evening, Schalk. Good evening, Karen. Thanks for the opportunity. I am a mechanical engineer, being capable and accredited to do steel structural design as well. I've been in the business for 40 years now, and the way I see it happens is as follows. These walkways were constructed evidently in the 80s. Now, back then, the Department of Public Works supplied school buildings to schools, and already in those years, the school parents had to do the improvements on the school terrain out of own resources. And Scott, you must please interrupt me if I've got it wrong on the legal side of things. So what I think what happened there was the school buildings were quite new back then in that city, and the school governing body realized that there was a need for these walkways between the upper floors of the various unconnected buildings. And then they must have probably decided that they were going to put out tenders to acquire and have these constructed on the school terrain between the buildings. My guess is that as it happened in those years, they didn't appoint an engineer or an architect to oversee that process, and they were putting out a tender document which was very, very basic, probably just stating we need so many walkways between these buildings, and we ask you to tender on that. So contractors must have came in and measured up, get the dimensions of what was required, and they every contractor did his own tender. Of course, without having had a proper specification, every tenderer designed according to his own knowledge and his budget that he allowed for. And as it usually goes, the bid went to the lowest tenderer, and he started constructing. Now, being the lowest tenderer, his margins must have been quite under pressure, and he used see from the pictures on the social media that he used as columns for those walkways. He used square tubing or hollow sick. And now that is a square pipe which is rolled from flat material of thin to create a fairly thin walled section. In this case, the columns was 80 millimeters by 80 millimeters. It's just over 3 inches by 3 inches. And the usual wall thickness of those things are 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch usually. Now, to use that kind of column, they usually weld it in and they paint it, of course, only from the outside. The inside does not get painted because you unless you dip it in paint or unless you have it galvanized, it just stays unpainted and it starts rusting from day one. Furthermore, between the columns there were no cross bracing to prevent these structures from acting like a mechanism. I also saw on the social media the extent of the rust at the bottom of those columns at the foot plates where they were anchored to the concrete. And being only a 3 millimeter wall thickness, the pictures that I saw was about 80%. It was only 20% left load-bearing material. All right. So back then, in the pre-1993 times, the accountability for a structure like that could easily be passed on to the contractor. Since 1993, we got the Operational Health and Safety Act, and with that act, the accountability for the technical integrity or safety falls back to the employer or the employer body, being the school board in this case, and in person then the chairman of the school board. Or if he decides to appoint an accredited agent like a registered professional engineer, that accountability becomes the responsibility of the professional engineer to design that in accordance with acceptable design codes, to oversee the construction and then sign off, and with that signing off take the accountability for safety of those kind of platforms. All right, so back then, with the cheapest contractor using the cheapest materials and a very shoddy design, this was, with rust, a time bomb waiting to happen. Now, this design is also a mixture between steel and concrete. Now, back in the 80s, when I was a very young engineer, the use of concrete became very, very fashionable, of the use of concrete with steel reinforcing. And somehow the engineering fraternity lived with this conviction that concrete is sort of forever. Now, only recently it started to emerge, and I did not do some research on this specifically, but it started to emerge that the integrity life of concrete is around 40 years. One can see that in the overhead bridges that are starting to crumble now, which is another time bomb waiting to happen.
Yes.
excuse me. So the life of the concrete being 40 years. The walkways at Driehoek was a mixture between steel and concrete. On the top frame, they had like U-channels on its side, and the concrete was cast between the U's to form the walkway surface between the two steel channels. Usually they employ what they call fishtails, which is like a fishtail being welded into the U to bind the steel to the concrete. Now, in this case, evidently there were no fishtails welded on the inside of the steel frame. Now came regime change. The budgets evidently for the white schools for maintenance were cut down to a very, very minimalistic percentage of the operating cost, or what was required to properly maintain the facilities. But
Mr. E, I just want to quickly interrupt you. I don't want to be, because it's extremely interesting what you're telling the listeners here. I just want to quickly recap so that we have absolute surety about what you're saying. So in other words, the then Department of Public Works would have built the building, the actual big structure, and then hand it over to a school's governing body or the Department of Education or whatever. So their responsibility stopped. It was signed off. The building is correct. It was given over. So they have no further indaba in what is going on there. Is that correct?
That's the way I remember it from the days when my children were small, and the day when they were at school. Sorry for that.
No. And then I just want to recap. Okay, now your observation as an expert is to the following. You're saying to us, but from the photographs that you saw, there's already a problem, number one, with the square tubing that is used. You're not supposed to even use square tubing on structures like that. It's basically a bridge between buildings. It's a walkway between higher up buildings. So that in itself was already incorrect when it was built way back. I don't know who built it. We will have to actually have an investigation to that. So that was already done incorrectly.
That was already done incorrectly. I cannot specifically state that the regulations that were in place back then did exclude that kind of material, but I strongly suspect that it would. Because the structures and walkways that I've been exposed to in industry would not, never is the hollow section steel being used for that, and you are just not allowed to use that kind of construction material, because you cannot rust-proof it. You can do nothing about the corrosion inside those sections.
Exactly. It's simple square tubing. Yes, it makes sense to me what you're saying. But on top of that, beyond that, we also have a wrong pouring and the wrong use of the concrete. So it's a second mistake relating to structure that you have observed. So it's already.
That is actually, sorry, Schalk?
Yes, go ahead.
That is actually the third mistake, because number one, it was not designed evidently by an engineer. Okay. Number two, during construction, there was no supervision by an engineer to ensure quality assurance. And then the third one is the square tubing. The fourth one is the lack of binding between the concrete slab and the steel support.
And exactly what you were saying is basically a time bomb that was just waiting at some stage to fall. And we're speaking here of old structures. It's 30, 40 years old. So there was already a probability it would have gone. But we're seeing a very interesting picture here. It's historic. It's not something that happened the last 4 or 5 or 10 years. It was done wrong in the first place, and apparently nobody at that point in time saw that it was done incorrectly. Okay, then you wanted to say to us, but now the new era came after '94, and the budgets for the upkeep of buildings. Those budgets were cut in the meantime. We know that it's not a conspiracy theory. We can go and draw the actual amounts allocated to schools. So we know that the budgets became smaller, and of course there was a cutting of corners to actually just have a budget and pay everybody. What is your observation from there on, Mr. E?
Having said that, I heard from people last night saying that yes, but there were inspections done on those structures recently, but if you don't do thickness tests with fairly sophisticated methods, you just cannot see what the extent of the corrosion inside those columns are. So having said that, and maybe with the lack of expertise, not many people suspected that there could have been a problem with that. It's not like the flyover concrete bridges that you see the concrete starting to crack. You see nothing, and one day it just collapses due to lack of load-bearing material being eaten away by the corrosion.
Yes, because it's corroding from the inside. It's impossible to see it. The outside is fine because that is painted with oil paint. There's no corrosion on the outside, but it's been corroded for many years, over decades, on the inside. It becomes paper thin, and at one point, just too much of pressure, and it breaks, and it starts to collapse. It makes sense to me what you're explaining to us. Tell me, Mr. E, you mentioned a certain piece of legislation, that there's actual legislation in South Africa in place, and it was promulgated a few years back, or a decade or so back. Just explain to us what you mean by that.
I think there was a slackness back then, because the reasoning was, if the contractor does a shoddy job, we just hammer the contractor. Now, since 1993, the Operational Safety and Health Act came in, and that stipulates that the accountability falls back to the employer. And in other words, the originator of the work of the project to be done.
Yes.
And nowadays, what he does, he appoints a registered, or in other words, accredited professional engineer to do the design and sometimes to do the supervision as well. Usually, if he appoints him. Sometimes the attitude is to the contractor: you appoint the professional engineer for design and supervision. And what happens many times, we see it even today, the contractor appoints the engineer. The engineer does the design in accordance with the standards and regulations. And then after design, the contractor decides I'm not going to incur the costs on my contract to employ him for the supervision as well. So many times the contractor stuffs up the design during construction and alters the design intent of the engineer, and then these roofs, like we've seen in the shopping malls in and around Pretoria and Johannesburg, these roofs fall in, not due to bad design, but due to lack of quality assurance during construction. So in that case, even in that case, the accountability for safety is with the employer, because under correction, but the law has the view that the employer should appoint the engineer to do both the design and the supervision. Only then the employer can delegate the accountability to the engineer. But the bad news is for the employer is, even if the contractor appoints the engineer for design and not for supervision, the accountability stays with the employer, because he was supposed to appoint the engineer for both phases.
And in the case then of Driehoek School, it would have been the school's governing body, or is it the Department of Education?
I don't know whether the law works retrospectively or not. But in terms of the post-1993 legal framework, the school's governing body will be the accountable person, legal person, to take the blame for that. But I can't really say that I doubted whether that 1993 OSH Act works retrospectively.
Yes, I understand. Because legislation would usually not work retrospectively. It's impossible to bind a person with a new law 20 years back or 30 years back action that he did then. Is there any obligation in terms of the OSH Act? Let's use the abbreviation. Is there any obligation then on the current school's governing body to have regular inspections to make sure that the buildings are safe?
I think they would have difficulty in shrugging their shoulders, because having known that they've inherited a structure from a previous dispensation when safety was much more slack. The new owners, and that also includes the department, should know what they have inherited, and with that kind of construction materials, any engineer would have told them, look, we don't know what the condition of these are inside. And we should really employ somebody to do some thickness determination on these structures. But apart from that, he would have also told them that the design is very, very wrong.
Yes, Mr. I
intrinsically unsafe from what he could have seen, not from the concrete point of view, because you can't see it whilst it's still standing there, but from the structural point of view. Apart from the square tubing, there were no cross bracings forming structural triangles, which would prevent the structure from acting like a mechanism and fall.
I understand that. But you're an engineer. You will see these things. Myself, as a lay person relating to engineering, And I'm thinking back now of schools that I visit with my children when they do sports, their own school, etc. I cannot remember on those walkways to ever see a triangulation of steel. It's simple square tubing. It's simple pillars under these constructions. I cannot recall ever seeing. And I know now when you say these things, I think to myself when I see the building of structures, the cross bracing of structures, I cannot remember that I've ever seen anything like that in a school.
Yes, back in those days, the various provincial departments, I know from what was it called, the departments of the provincial department of hospitals, or I think it was the provincial administrations. They had quite strong engineering offices permanently, and they did some. I know from the health point of view, and hospitals, which is not necessarily structural, but on other things, they did very useful and good designs that they employ. And I suspect in this case, the Department of the Provincial Department of Education also had a structural engineering office where they produced these standard designs. That could also have happened. Produce these standard designs, and I only came to that conclusion since yesterday when I saw from another school, here's a lot of square tubings again being used all over the place. And I suspect it was a standard design which they employed and issued to contractors to tender from. That could also have happened, and that design being very, very intrinsically unsafe with time and with as well.
Yes, and as you explained, the concrete itself, everybody was under the idea the concrete will last forever. Now we see it lasts for maybe 30 or 40 years.
Yes.
Now, Mr. E, this is really it's shocking, and I'm sitting here, I'm shocked more than I suspected I would be shocked, because what you're actually saying to me is from an engineer's point of view, you realize now, and you can say this on air, in public, on record, there's probably and possibly a design flaw, a design structure in most of school buildings in South Africa relating to the evidence in front of you now.
Yes. I must say, if I see square tubing, I see red, because it's not rust protected at all. It will fail. It will fail due to rust.
And people believe
that's terrible. I'm sitting here with goosebumps when you say that.
Yes.
Because let's go back to the responsibility and the obligation of the schools governing boards. Now, in South Africa, just for the listeners, the Department of Education runs certain schools, but certain schools are run by school governing boards, which is actually a body of parents and maybe professionals now and again. And that school's governing body is usually chosen per year. It's usually a year, an annual term, during which time these parents, it's basically parents that are elected from the body of parents at that school, and they govern the school. Now, most of those people are lay persons, once again, relating to engineering. I can't imagine myself a lot of engineers even being available to be voted into school governing boards. It's usually people that are available, who will have time to do that. And it now falls on those people's shoulders to actually take the burden from things that were done wrong for decades ago. And I'm very sure
unaware of, and still are unaware of.
Yes, I wasn't aware of it. I'm a lawyer. It's the first time that I listen to you now that I become aware of this. So for the average, and I'm not being derogatory, I'm being practical, for a housewife whose child is in the school and she's being voted into this governing body, there's no way on earth that she will even realize that there is a problem in this instance. An ordinary man on the street, he's being voted into a school's governing body. He takes a responsibility on his shoulders. The chairperson of that body, he takes the responsibility wholesale on him now for a design that was done wrong 40 years ago.
Yes.
Now this is shocking. This is really it's shocking. I'm sitting here and I don't know how to process this in my mind because it's a huge problem. If this is the problem. The Department of Education, are you aware of any procedures from them to say to schools, but on a regular basis, annually, every 5 years, every 10 years, how long, it doesn't matter, but you must now inspect that the structures are correct. Do you know of any legislation that level regulating things?
I'm not aware of, and I didn't do any homework on that. I suspect from the pre-1994 days, and if they carried it over, it might still be like that. They had all the departments which were responsible for state or provincial assets, and an inspectorate department where they had inspectors inspecting all these state buildings and state structures. People say it's been inspected by the education department not very long ago. So I suspect there might still be some remnants of those sub-departments that could do inspections like that. But whether anybody would realize, look, if it's done with square tubing, you have to employ some very sophisticated thickness measures from the outside, which is in some cases ultrasonic or maybe X-ray techniques to determine the wall thickness of those structures. Even back then, people didn't realize that. So it's not a conspiracy at all. It's a time bomb that came from back then. But what should have happened is maybe, with hindsight, is that the state machinery at takeover in 94 should have ascertained what assets they have and what the conditions they are in and what their risks are around those. But it wouldn't have emerged back then already because then it was only 14, 15 years old.
Yes, I understand that fully. I understand it. The problem could have been foreseen, but once again, coming from a technical background, not even you, I think, until you saw the pictures, you as an engineer didn't even realize this. And now we're sitting with the practical problem once again of those people inspecting. I hear fully what you're saying. They won't have the mechanisms or the mechanics or the tools to do the actual correct measurements. It will most probably be on eyeball one. They will look at the structure and say, well, we can't see any rust. It's a solid structure, and they would pass it on and tick it off as correct and done. Coming back, and I want to move our attention a little bit from schools into other buildings. On a regular basis, well, not regular, but from time to time we hear of the Department of Labor going into buildings. I've been on site with my clients when Department of Labor do these things, and they do actual investigations to ascertain if buildings are safe for work, workspaces are safe. Now, once again, it's not done very technical or from an engineering background. It's done eyeball one, a layperson inspector from the department going in. Later on, they can call, if there's an accident, they can call on engineers to come and inspect the thing and do a report. But you find from time to time that the Department of Labor do these inspections relating to workspaces. Now, obviously, a school is a workspace because there's teachers and there's cleaning staff, etc., working there. So even the Department of Labor comes into play here because somewhere somebody must have realized that there's unsafe structures for employees. But apparently that also not happened.
evidently that didn't happen. The Department of Labor, I must say, they are in terms of industry and enforcing the law in industry, they are quite up to date. They are quite sharp, and but in spite of that, in industry you still get the odd factory manager here and there that puts a pressure vessel, being a potential bomb, of course, if it's not done correctly, which puts a pressure vessel without the necessary precautions on design and construction on a factory floor, and exposing his employees to a potential bomb. That still also happens, but Department of Labor is quite strict nowadays on the OSH Act.
Mr. Iwi, we're coming very close now. It's 10 to 4 South African. We're coming very close to the first hour of our show. So I'm just going to ask our other host, Karen, from your side, do you have questions? I want in the second part of our show, I want to go a little bit further into legal technicalities, and I'm still going to utilize Mr. E to assist us with that. But on what you've heard now, do you have any questions that you want to ask him, Karen?
Schalk, as you said in the beginning, we're not technical people.
Hello, Karen?
Hello.
I think we actually lost Karen.
No, Schalk, I turned my mic off. I muted my mic.
Oh, sorry, Karen. Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, no,
yes.
I'm not a technical person, as you said in the beginning. We are not technical people. But what distresses me is that these kind of things there must be bribery and corruption involved. You cannot get a building passed by building inspectors if the quality is so poor. And as you said yourself, now this responsibility is passed on decades later to parents who had nothing to do with it. Their children are grown up and parents already. And what scares me is that under good governance, this was probably considered okay for our children. The absolute disregard for children's lives is frightening to me. And that's really I don't have any technical or legal comments, but the scare factor of this is horrific for me.
Yes, indeed. And the magnitude of this problem, it's just terrible where we're going with this conversation, because it means that it's not one or two schools. It's probably a whole generation of schools that were built, because during the 80s there was a huge emphasis by the then government, the 80s, the 70s and 80s, to build schools and to improve schools, etc. So it's a whole generation of schools school buildings that we're speaking about here, and it's countrywide. It's a problem of the magnitude that I did not realize until now. An hour ago, I did not realize this is the magnitude of what we're dealing with.
Well, just to add a little bit of humor in there, because it's not a very humorous conversation. These schools will probably get burnt down before they fall down.
Well, they're white schools in white areas, but I suppose in the black areas you will have probably the same problem, if not worse. Of course, in the last couple of years, the many schools built there, and we can only start to speculate on the shabby work that gone into those, because in the old apartheid days, the NP government days, it was proper governance, and if they made stuff ups and hash ups during that era, what happened afterwards?
Exactly.
What happened afterwards?
Exactly. Because if these schools were built in the 80s, a lot of them were probably in the pre-building stages in 1994 when the ANC took over, because there was a big push for education and more schools. So those schools were still in the planning and building stages in the 1990s. And can you imagine what happened then? Can you just imagine when bribery became such an enormous thing? So if I give you 3 bottles of whiskey, you'll just pass this horrible building for me.
Unfortunately, the ANC government has almost built no schools.
Did they not complete ones that were already happening though, or did they just leave them?
I'm under correction with that, but they themselves, they just did not. I won't say any, but the amount of schools built is
negligible.
Very far between. These the way I see these the pictures of that Driehoek Hoërskool is your typical Transvaal Provincial Administration architecture school. So this is the kind of thing that I've seen the design of the bridges at pictures of it at 2 schools, and so it's probably schools in our Gauteng province and the whole old Transvaal. That's where the Transvaal Provincial Administration at their jurisdiction over school properties back then. So at the very least, it's most of the schools with walkways north of the Vaal River. That's really suspect now.
And Mr. Issa, what you're saying is that these schools have reached beyond the end of their life and should be thoroughly inspected, either repaired or just broken down and rebuilt before more children are killed.
Yeah, look, the design of the walkways are intrinsically unsafe. So those walkways will have to be demolished and started all over with better designs and better construction.
And as we all know, this is not going to happen.
Probably not, because I don't think there's budget for that either. Because that's not maintenance anymore. That's capital that they need to budget for.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. And you know, the school, what bothers me is with the class sizes getting so much bigger. I mean, they've grown, they've doubled since the time those schools were built. So the weight on those walkways every day has doubled.
Yep. That's most probably also a very pertinent factor here. Because the loading, it was designed for certain loading, which could not be controlled in any way, but now the loading and the then designer took a figure of so many pedestrians per square meter, and now that's probably doubled.
Yeah, I mean that must have an impact on the building, surely.
Absolutely, and with the rusted support columns, which are well, you can't really translate that very well. It's actually Schalk. It's blik columns.
Tin.
It's blik. It's blik pilare.
Yeah,
so it's tin. Right. It's tin. You would not even construct a roof. I would suppose in South Africa, proper roof construction only using thin tubing like that. Wouldn't.
Right. We are at an ad break.
And I think we're also not speculating and relating to the load being carried on these structures. And now I wanted to just dwell a little bit on what we see now in pictures of bridges. It's not school buildings, actual bridges where cars and buildings, cars and trucks are passing over. I saw one that it's very close to the main airport in Johannesburg. Now, once again, when those structures were built in the first place 40 and 50 years ago, it could never have been imagined that they would carry the amount of traffic that's being carried to this day. We can see it on our roads. The road constructions, the roads are falling apart because it was built for maybe a third or a quarter of the amount of traffic that passes on it today. So we're not even speculating. The same would apply then for school buildings. The same would apply for everything. We have an old infrastructure, very old and dilapidated infrastructure, now supposed to carry even more than it was ever designed to carry. It's a time bomb. The whole construction, I would say, the whole construction realm in South Africa, public buildings, roads, etc. We've come to the end of the road relating to those.
Yeah, and their lifetime is over. Their lifetime is over. They need replacing.
Yes, and it's not going to happen because, as Mr. E. yourself pointed out, there is no budget for it. There is not even budget to have actual upkeep of these structures. Now, how do you replace those structures? The Medupi power plant, you can maybe comment on that, because I'm very sure you know about that one, where they actually under budgeted to an extent that I can't imagine how big the problem, the under calculations were. And the escalation of cost just to complete a simple structure like that. It's a power station that they are building, and now they're running into problems that it costs 3 or 4 times more than what's budgeted. It's impossible to put an amount, an actual figure to how much we're going to need to actually start replacing all the schools in South Africa.
Yep. Well, gentlemen, we're at an ad break. We will be back with you in about 4 minutes.
Okay.
When camping overnight, your tent is one of the most important items you'll have with you. That's why it's vital to have a quality tent that is easy to carry and will withstand the elements. Teton Sports offers top quality tents for any of your camping needs. The Outfitter XXL cot tent weighs only 4 pounds, but provides plenty of space for a comfortable night's sleep. Teton Sports also has a 6-man tent, which weighs only 14 pounds for camping overnight with friends and family. Each tent is easy to assemble and is easily transportable, and each is made with 1200 millimeter coated polyester, providing strong and durable protection from weather and cold. Teton Sports also offers sleeping bags, backpacks, duffels, and more to ensure a quality outdoor experience. Wherever your outdoor adventures take you, you will be safe and comfortable in a quality tent from Teton Sports. Look for Teton Sports products at Amazon.com, Sportsman's Warehouse, Dick's Sporting Goods, Wholesale Sports, or visit TetonSports.com.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.
Today is an important day. It's your day to be ready, take care of your family, and buy your emergency food supply from the Freeze Dry Guy. Because today, the Freeze Dry Guy introduces our Mountain House and Packaway 1-month food supply. Today, get the Freeze Dry Guy's 30-day premium unit, normally $364, sale price at $263. Save $101. Buy 2 cases, normally $727, sale price at $506. Save $222. Or choose 3 30-day premium units, normally $1,091, now only $748. Save $343 from the Freeze Dry Guy. These premium units are packed with the highest quality Mountain House entrees, meats, vegetables, and Packaway brand freeze-dried pineapple and dehydrates, such as milk, ABC stew, and rolled oats, 289 half-cup servings. Go to freezedryguy.com or call 866-404-3663. That's freezedryguy.com or call 866-404-3663. Free shipping to the lower 48. Hurry, our Mountain House and Packaway 1-month supply sale ends soon. So call now, 866-404-3663.
Are you worried about America? Do you fear the power of the Obama brigades to take away your rights? The Obama presidency is the most radical left-wing administration in American history. Our constitutional liberties are in danger. What can you do? Join the Council of Conservative Citizens. For over 20 years, the CFCC has fought for the rights and ideals of the European American majority. The CFCC has won legal and political battles to protect your heritage and your liberties. The CFCC advocates strong state governments over the power of Washington, D.C. to rule your life. The CFCC believes in an American-first foreign and domestic policy which opposes globalism and one-world government. The CFCC advocates racial integrity as God's natural order. Visit our website today at www.cfcc.org and join fellow European Americans in the fight for our people.
Thanks for listening to Project Schoolyard Volume 2. For more information about the project, as well as lyrics to the songs on this CD, please visit www.tightrope.cc. You can also find jokes, news articles, a photo gallery, free CD downloads, and a secure online shopping cart. We carry a full line of flags, t-shirts, CDs, books, stickers, and other products of interest to racially conscious white people. Please visit www.tightrope.cc.
Restore the Republic, the social network for the modern revolutionary, activating the silent masses into action. At restoretherepublic.net, we're seizing power from the globalist world controllers and handing it back to the people. restoretherepublic.net, where patriots rally on the objective. The Liberty Bell tolls once again for a movement on the rise. Make restoretherepublic.net your place to unify and activate the revolution.
You're listening to Radio Free South Africa with Corinne Smith on ResolutionRDO.com. Call in to listen now at 607-203-5423. That's 607-203-5423.
And you're back with Radio Free South Africa, your host, Schalk Merwe, and our mystery guest, Mr. E, discussing the absolute downfall of South Africa and how the buildings, the roads, the infrastructure, everything is falling apart. It's a very, very scary thought given the other problems that this country faces. Now back to Schalk.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, I want to dwell on another facet here, and that relates to what was now the effect of what Mr. E just described to us, and that was that school children, school students were actually killed. And my fullest and most sincere sympathy for the victims and for the family and friends of those young victims. I really feel for it, and the whole community in South Africa, we are feeling for you. There was a huge outcry of sadness and mourning because of this. But speaking from a legal point of view, obviously there must now be some recourse. And because people have been killed, now the first thing that comes to mind is, can a person be charged of murder? For instance, the head of the school governing body, can that person be charged for murder? Or will he be charged for another charge? And I would suppose that there would definitely be a criminal charge of culpable homicide. Now, murder envisages where a person has the intent of ending a life, whereas culpable homicide is negligence. Now, what I heard now, there was surely negligence. Now, what is negligence? The legal term negligence, it refers to the reasonable man. Would the reasonable man have foreseen or have done, etc.? And here it's very, very clear to me that the reasonable engineer or the reasonable man should have foreseen that there is a problem and should have foreseen that at some point in time there could be deaths coming from this. So I would propose there would definitely be a criminal charge of culpable homicide against whoever is found to be responsible, have been responsible here. So it's a tremendous issue here that the person can actually go to jail because of what happened and was done incorrectly 30 or 40 years ago. Mr. E, from your side, what is your take on that?
Look, Schalk. Yes, culpable homicide is a probability, I reckon. But during those inspections, the following scenario might play out. The inspector comes to the school and he says, "Oh, this column is rusted. You must sand it down and just paint it again." Whilst the reality is, when you see the rust on the outside, there is no material left anymore. And I think the reasonable, responsible member of the school governing body will not realize that there is grave danger in seeing rust on those columns. And I've seen the pictures. Like I said, in one case, there was about 20% of the load-bearing material left on the bottom of it. So yes, I think the legal process will definitely go there, but having to defend that or to get to a guilty finding will be quite difficult. I must say this is a tragedy. I see your children are still also of that age. This is a tragedy and something that parents will have to prepare their children for in the best way they can. But how can you really prepare your children for that?
No, I mean, how do you tell your children before they go to school today? And I'll be very careful because the school might fall on your head. I mean, really, it sounds like you're some lunatic.
It's the South African twilight zone again, because that is exactly what will happen now. We will actually have to tell our children, you can be killed, and there's a certain amount of humor in this, and I appreciate the humor, but once again, coming back to the human factor in this, how do you send your child to school now, bearing in mind that this could happen to them today? You're sending the person, your child, into a death zone. This is actually what's going on here that we did not realize until now. And coming back to the culpable homicide, with this incident now fully known throughout South Africa, the media carried it. Everybody knows about it. There was actually pictures taken of further schools, like Mr. E is pointing out, where school children themselves now say they took it with their little cell phones. But we are seeing things that's not supposed to be. Some of the pictures that I saw, the flooring, the actual flooring was already breaking up. So in other words,
that specific picture, you must have seen that the hand railing was also made of square tubing. Yes. That's a big picture. You can, if you remember correctly, the hand railing was also square tubing, although maybe the hand railing is not all that critical, but that will also corrode from the inside and break off. But yeah, that's what the difference.
Mr. E, we're dealing with school children. School children, I used to hang on school railings and slide down the things and I had a magnificent time at school, because that is what school children do. Never mind that. In the ordinary run of the mall business, in a mall, in any mall, and that you walk over a walkway, there's railing to protect you from falling down. Now, if that railing is itself now it's so dilapidated and so corroded on the inside that we can actually see it on cell phone photographs, it means that there's a tremendous problem here, and we're only it's only dawning on us at this point. Now, what happened with the second set of pictures? It was sent to me throughout the day that the school then called in the child that took the pictures, and they scorned him and said to him, "But why are you doing this? You're putting the school's name into this repute now." So the principal in that school is missing the point totally. It's not putting the name into disregard. Yeah? This child actually did a very good thing in pointing out, but to me as a school child, I could see there's a little problem here. And this comes back to the issue of culpable homicide. If that principal now, those pictures were taken, he does nothing about it. Now, then he's not acting like a reasonable man is acting. And he should be charged. He should be charged with culpable homicide if anything happens, if a child is killed in any way in that school.
But should something not be done now before somebody else is killed? I mean, we really don't expect our children to go to school, the school building to collapse on them, and you never see them again. I mean, you really think that a school is a safe place for your children?
Yes, of course there must be preventative action now. As soon as possible, by tomorrow, I would think every school governing body in South Africa by tomorrow must be at that school, eyeball one, go and see what they can see, what is wrong. and get a structural engineer as quickly as possible to come and give a report. And if a school is unsafe, it must be closed down, point blank, full stop. You can't send children, not even adults, children into a possible death zone. No. This is what we're dealing with here.
It's true. And people say, we mustn't discuss this because it's all sensitive. This must be shouted out as loud as we can because this is a real life-endangering situation that we have here now.
And it must be deep politicized because now everybody's and it's now racism on the one side, and it's black people calling or I would say actually taking joy, certain elements among the black population taking joy in this, and it's become this huge political thing now. Lesotho, the minister, he was actually very sympathetic, but then, and I don't want to mention the particular trade union, a certain white trade union, came out in a media statement to say, but Minister Lesotho, you now acting backhanded. You're trying to take political points from this because you're actually gunning white schools and gunning Afrikaans schools. Now that may be so, but you could have used his presence there and the fact that the minister actually went there to your advantage. Go and speak to the guy and say to him, if this is a problem now, Mr. Lesotho, we need to address this problem. But why now go and attack this guy on a personal level? That was also done incorrectly.
This thing has got to do with life now, life threatening, and politics must now play second fiddle in this matter.
But
it's absolutely urgent. It's not politics.
But we all know that not just in South Africa, but throughout the world, everything is now political. Everything is used as a political football, and nothing ever gets done. The good thing about this tragedy is that the other schools can now not say that they were not aware of it and that they should have taken action. So when we talk about it again, we will not be saying 40 years later people who had no knowledge of this are going to bear the brunt of it. We're going to be saying 2 years after the first one happened, these people did know and did nothing.
Exactly. And Karen, that is why programs like ours is so important, because I cannot remember that in mainstream media in South Africa the last 2 or 3 days we had any discussion relating to the technical aspects. Everybody was going on about the politics and the nastiness between the population about this. And we're facing a real problem, and that is why programs like ourselves is so important, because we're going to put this on YouTube now. We're going to have an actual recording of this, and hear me out on this, Mr. E. We at some stage you're not going to be anonymous anymore, because we can.
Sure. And I'm quite prepared for that as well. Quite willing. You can even. You can even reveal my identity right now as well. I don't really have a problem with that. I think it's imperative, and it's very, very important that this thing is portrayed as being non-political and absolutely a matter of literal life and death.
Literal life and death. That's a fact, because what I was going to say is that we're going to send a recording of this specific program as it is here. Is going to be hand-delivered and signed off to the Department of Education to say to them that even in America people are speaking about this. This is an American broadcast, and we are speaking about this. So you will have to act. And if you do not act, Karen, this is pretty much the same that we did last time around relating to white genocide or genocide to the embassies, where we went to the embassies to say to them, you are now formally aware. Here are the statistics, here's the petitions, here's the actual numbers, etc. You are now party to genocide if you do not respond to this. And we're going to do exactly the same here. We're going to take this recording, we're going to hand it to the Department of Education, and say to them, and to the Department of Public Works, and to the Department of Labor, and say to them, You are now aware of the problem. If you do not respond, you become an accessory to anything that happens in the future. And you must take responsibility because it is your job. You must. You cannot budge and say, but it's now the school's governing body. What must they do? Walk around and eyeball one and say to one another, no, this thing is now unsafe. And then what? Who's going to fix it? Who's going to make the ultimate executive decision to say this school is unsafe? You must now evacuate the children. They cannot come here any longer. Who's going to make that actual decision? It will have to be at least on ministerial level that things are like this is discussed and decided upon.
Yeah, no, something has to be done because I actually feel quite ill. I've got 3 grandchildren at school, and I would not like to send them off to school tomorrow morning knowing what I know now. I would be very loath to let them leave the house, you know.
Schalk, and then as a matter of fact, not a matter of fact, a legal technicality here, which I did find out, there is no sub judice mechanism that can be applied to this discussion or this campaign that we need to do. Definitely,
I agree with you. And if you want to, you can reveal your name. But I definitely agree with you. There's no sub judice rule simply because we're discussing actual technicalities. We're discussing in general what is going on here. So we're definitely not interfering in any way to a legal process. In actual fact, I would then argue that we must become part of that legal process to say to them, but we're sitting with real information that you can utilize. You will have to hear these things because otherwise you're going to have a skewed and an incorrect finding in the end. So it's definitely not sub judice. I agree with you. If you want to introduce yourself, go ahead. I have no problem in that because in the coming days from here on, I'm going to campaign around this point and campaign hard. And you know me from social media. I make a huge ruckus about things and people hate me for that, but unfortunately it must be done. People must do this job.
Schalk, they might hate you short term, but when you save how many children's lives, you won't even be mentioned in that conversation. Only in the conversation that you made a hell of a lot of noise and stirred up chaos and whatever. But when it actually does save lives, it'll have nothing to do with you. You do know that.
Yes. Look, Schalk, this inscription on Facebook, more or less with this message, so I can my identity is already known. The thing is just that our people have to be retrained, herafgerig. Wat is 'n goeie vertaling? Retrained is a bit soft. We must re-educate. Reprogrammed. Our people will have to be reprogrammed to realize that, unlike in the past where we deemed the state buildings as very uninteresting but at least safe, it's not like that anymore due to the degeneration with time.
But as with everything else...
My name is Maurits Kutsia. So
Thank you very much, Maurits. Yes, Mr. Maurits Kutsia, a long-time friend of myself. And Maurits, the reason why I came to you first, because I saw your own opinions, and I know you regard it as a very trustworthy engineer and very reliable in your field. And that is when I read that you had certain things to say about this, I realized we're not dealing with the run-of-the-mill things here. We're not dealing with a freak accident, something that was not even supposed to happen. I realized, but if Maurits is writing about this, there must be something big here. And you're not a person that will run into the field making a lot of noise unnecessary. And that is why I appreciate you coming onto this show and actually highlighting to us how dire the situation is. I did not realize it. until an hour and a half ago, I was under the impression we're dealing with a little bit of a freak accident here. It's clearly not a freak accident.
No, it's not a freak accident. It's a time bomb, like we described. And we need to. It's our duty. It's our duty to shout this off the walls so that people can be re-educated and retrained.
So we have half an hour left, and in that half an hour, we need to discuss what is the solution to this. Because, as you said, Schalk, it's not just the schools. Those bridges are in a dire mess. And the traffic on those roads, I mean, how many tons of cars sit at a dead standstill on top of those flyovers every single day? Which, as you say, 40 years ago, 50 years ago when they were built, nobody ever imagined the weight they would carry, never mind standing still in a traffic jam. So, what is the solution? Because they're going to come down, and people are going to be killed in horrible, horrible ways, and the whole country is going to come to a standstill and go into mourning until the next one happens. So what is the solution? How do we make people pay attention? How do we fix the problem before there is more death?
Yes, Carl, let's build that narrative, because every single day in Gauteng, every single day, and Cape Town, and all the major cities, because of the traffic congestion in the cities, you are bound to have, you're quite correct, on those flyovers, those bridges, and there must be hundreds of those bridges. You're going to have traffic standing still on top of the bridge and underneath the bridge. So if that bridge comes down, we're dealing with maybe 20, 30, 40 cars. I don't know how many would be involved. Let's say 20 cars that will be involved. If a bridge falls onto a car, the person inside that car is going to die. That's it. Full stop. And yes, how do we solve that? Because it's a problem so big in magnitude. How do you solve that? It affects everything. It affects everything. Even the new buildings, or the new building of Rose around Gauteng, which was extensive. Many of those structures were built upon old structures. Now,
those structures were not upgraded, as far as I know the routes around here. They were not upgraded. They were just used as is.
Merwe, throw your thoughts about this. How do you fix this problem like this?
The schools, I think all the schools will definitely now get very thorough inspections. If the buildings are sort of okay and structurally sound, and those walkways, I think must be, and especially the ones built from square tubing, must be knocked down. And pupils must then mark, they must use the concrete steps. In other words, if they want to go from floor 3, in this building they go down and they walk over the school terrain and they take the steps at the other building. So for the time being, those walkways, before replacing them, will have to be knocked down, all of them. All of them being built with a square tubing material. They should be knocked down. The concrete bridges, like I said, I haven't done my research, but that is a capital project running into billions to replace those structures, and to test them or to ascertain what the extent of the cancer is inside the concrete, because that's where the cancer happens. The steel reinforcing starts to corrode through a very newly, as I understand it, a newly discovered corrosion process. Back then, the people said that if you put the steel inside the concrete, it's an alkaline environment, and the steel cannot rust in an alkaline environment. What wasn't realized back then is that the corrosion process taking place by bacteria will still happen, and that what evidently was coming into play now is that the bacterial corrosion is starting to cause the cancer. So very urgently to save lives, whether we are irrespective of our political position, that should be addressed, definitely.
But the realistic thing about this is that it's not going to happen because it is political, and with the number of schools that have been burnt down and that have not been rebuilt, and so because you didn't rebuild during the vacation, you didn't rebuild 3 schools that we burnt down last year, we're going to burn down another 4 this year to protest that. So, I mean, that is the reality of South Africa. So if they already have all of these schools that have been burnt down and are not being replaced, why would, I think the general consensus is if it's not broken yet, don't fix it. So they won't. And people will die, and it'll just be another, as I say, National Day of Mourning, and we'll go on as before until the next one happens, and the bridges fall down. I mean, they've let the roads go to hell. The roads in South Africa are more potholes than there are roads. And they're not fixing that. They've let the power stations, on which is critical for the economy of the country, they've let those dilapidate until they're not worth having. I don't know what in South Africa works correctly. I mean, the rubbish in the rivers and the dams and the water supply and blood running down the streets from the local abattoir, all of those things are not being addressed. So why do we think, I mean, for us, our kids' safety is at a premium, but why do we think that anyone would take notice of that when everything else is falling apart?
Yeah, Karen, but unfortunately, the threat is of such a nature that we need to start thinking on a smaller scale for now. For example, the school where Schalk children are going to might decide on their own, this bridge is not safe.
Yeah.
We are gonna tear it down. We're gonna demolish it.
Yeah.
And just for the sake of our own children. So having lack of government in cases where there's life-threatening situations, people will have to take the responsibility of making decisions themselves, unfortunately, and that's what responsible parents will probably do.
So, Schalk, can I ask a legal question then? If it's a public school run by the Department of Education, and the parents formed a committee and raised the money to do it, are they allowed to do that or not?
Well, yes, Maurits, you can pitch in. You can pitch in.
So no, this is a legal question, Schalk. Let me pitch in afterwards. Sorry for that.
Okay. In the general run of the mill, it will not be. You cannot do that. For the very simple reason, it must be done to a certain regulation and a certain standard, and it will not be legal. But now we had a constitutional court finding relating to roads, where you can actually now go and fix a road and then charge your money back to the municipality. Now, on that same principle, you will most probably able to do that, but it's going to take a precedent-setting case, and we know precedent-setting cases take a very long time before it's heard. So I don't foresee that is going to be a practical measure of doing it. And once again, the cost. Remember, we're not speaking of small money here. We're speaking of a proper steel structure that needs to be built at every one of those intersections, those walkways between the buildings. It's not the amount of money, and I hear fully what you're saying. It's a very good idea if parents then start to pitch in and take responsibility on themselves. But the practical issue is once again one of cost. A simple costing is going to make that impossible, if impractical, if not impossible.
Yeah.
So I don't foresee that is going to happen. I think that the campaign must rather than focus on putting pressure as hard as possible on the school, but not in a negative way, not confrontational, going to the school's governing body and now being aggressive with them and saying to them, yeah, but you know bad and you're putting our children's lives at stake. They inherited a problem that they did not create. So we must be very sensitive to those people also, and even to the school principal and the teachers. Like in this other school, everybody was going on social media today about how bad the principal and the teacher was now for calling in the school child a pupil and chastising him. But there's also a lot of pressure on that teacher and that principal. We must go to him in a very civilized and sensitive way and say to them, there's a problem here. We need to fix the problem. You can either be part of the solution, or we're going to see you as part of the problem. But be realistic about this. We want you to be part of the solution. And speaking in that way to the people responsible for this. But it will have to happen as quickly as possible. We can't sit on our bombs and knowing what we know now, not act upon it.
And remember, the decision makers are still in the frame of mind that state buildings, state assets are safe. So they need to be reprogrammed that strong action is a matter of life and death right now.
Yes, exactly.
Because, Schalk, it's not just the cost of the building, it's the fact that the school has to have alternate accommodation for those classes while it's fixed, etc., etc. I mean, it's an enormous undertaking for one school, never mind dozens of them. And there will be a ton of resistance to that, especially because there's no budget. But then they must make an emergency budget before it becomes a real death emergency.
Yes, it will have to be done. I don't know how, but it will have to be done. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And for us to make cheap politics to load it onto Facebook and get Facebook likes because you want to entertain politics and raise your political party's profile, that's sick. It's immoral and it's sick and it must be stopped as soon as possible. The South African public, whether that be white or black, it doesn't matter, will have to come out very strongly and say, we are now fed up with political parties riding and even trade unions and even so-called civil rights organizations riding this thing to make a profit and raise their profile because of this. And I'm not only speaking of the school's problem now, I'm speaking of a whole host of other things that can be sorted out and fixed in a simple, rational and a practical way between practical thinking people. Self-determination. Merwe is fully aware of my, and yourself, Karen, of my view on self-determination. It's a practical thing of where an ethnic group simply comes to the government and say to the government, we want to govern ourselves. We have the right in terms of Section 235 of our own constitution and international law. Let us just do this and govern ourselves. It is not supposed to be a huge political issue. But it is becoming one because people are pushing it in the wrong direction. And that is what's scaring me about these things. It's scaring me because it's over-politicized. If we have self-determination... Yes, Karen?
The white people are 90+% of the tax base, as I understand it. I don't know the exact figure, but there is...
the majority of tax. I can't say it's 90%, but the majority of tax comes from the white population.
Why would any government agree to letting, as Moses said, let my people go. Why would any government agree to letting those taxpayers go? Because then their entire pack of cards falls down.
Crime is going to become a practical problem for the government if they do not do that. And you must remember, it's not only the white people searching for self-determination. I was in long discussions this morning with Khoisan leaders, and not like this one that seceded the Cape.
Yeah.
I'm speaking of real Khoisan leaders on the ground, people that want exactly the same. We're dealing with the Ambutembu people in the Eastern Cape who want exactly the same. We're dealing with the Bangona people up north, exactly the same. So it's not only a white thing, and it must be seen in a practical way rather than a politicized and emotional way. I hear fully what you're saying. It would be ludicrous for a government to cut off the engine of the country, and now all of a sudden those people can govern themselves.
Yeah.
But at least can start at the point to say, but internal self-determination, Section 235, in this area, Afrikaner people, you govern yourselves, and work out the deal relating to money, and work out the deal relating to the industries and the businesses and the tax base relating to that. But it must be done in a practical way. To go and sit down and say, this is how it's supposed to be, this is how it's going to work in the future, and work out the deal. I know people are very scared, the white population, they are so scared with reason for us to go and sit down, and I don't even want to use the word negotiate, because it's not going to be negotiate like Kudesa was. But that will have to happen at some point, because if it doesn't happen, and here's the counterpoint, if it doesn't happen, you're going to have a civil war within 5 to 10 years from now. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And it's not even going to be a white-black initial civil war. It's going to be a black-on-black war that's going to transpire. It will happen. It will happen.
I think you're being very, very kind with your 5 to 10 years, because what I see, and yes, I'm not there, but what I see is with these tens of thousands pouring in from Zimbabwe, and the already skyrocketing unemployment rate in South Africa, and more businesses going to leave when this expropriation comes in. Don't you think that you're going to have a gazillion xenophobic attacks happening?
Yes.
That's what I see initially.
Yes. I'm painting a rose-colored picture already by saying 5 to 10 years from now. We've reached. I wrote about it 2 years ago, I think, or 3 years ago, where I said we're entering the point of the perfect storm.
Yeah.
And we crossed the point of the perfect storm already.
Yeah.
The economy going down and can't be rescued anymore. We know that. We see that. Ramaphosa came out today to say that there are billions of rands of investments coming in. Yes, I can vouch for that. I work on a deal. As I speak to you now, I'm working on a deal with billions of rands. That's coming into South Africa, but it's localized, and it's very small in scale relating to the bigger economy. Because South Africa, and that is what the outside world doesn't realize, we're a tremendously big economy. It's huge. It's huge. It's not maybe the scale of the European economies, but for Africa, it's a huge economy. So to bring in 5 billion rands worth of investment, it sounds like a huge amount of money, but it's not. It's not. It's a little pinprick into the economy. So Ramaphosa can stand on his soapbox and tell us there's billions of rands flowing into South Africa. Yes, it is like that, but it's not doing any good. It's so small, that investment, that direct investment is so small, it does not counter the amount of money that's flowing out of the country.
Yes.
And that is what is realizing. We have a trade deficit that at its highest point ever in South Africa on a daily basis. Because of the trade deficit alone, we are losing so much money that runs out of South Africa that we will be bankrupt. If not already, we will be bankrupt in a few months from now. That is literally what we're running into. The perfect storm is here. So if I say 5 years, I'm really giving us a lot of time, and I'm presupposing sane and rational people will keep the thing under a close lid.
But
I don't know if that's going to happen.
Can't, Scott. It has, as we said at the beginning of this show, this thing in South Africa has exploded worldwide. It really has. And it's thanks to alternate media, not to the mainstream press. But even they are beginning to have to report on it. One American news network frequently does updates on South Africa. Now, that is the first time in 8 years here that I have seen any mainstream show report on South Africa and events in South Africa. So that alone says that people can't say they didn't know. So it is exploding, but they are unable to keep it under wraps. Ramaphosa did himself a real big disservice by that speech he gave on American TV or radio when he was here at the United Nations. He did himself a severe disservice by lying straight-faced that everything's fine in South Africa. And he's still doing that all over the world. With his begging bowl out, everything's fine, we're open for business, business is great. You know, we're only going to we're going to steal from you, but with a legal process. I still can't get my head around that, but anyway. And the world is listening to him. But there is going to come that breaking point where they're not going to believe it anymore. And that is when it's all going to break open. But I fear that the situation in Zimbabwe is going to spill over so big into South Africa in an already strained economy where more are on social grants than are employed, that the country cannot sustain it. And being the people they are going to blame others for the problem. So they're going to point to the Zimbabweans and any other people, and then it's going to be the whites, and then it's going to be the Indians, and then after that, I don't know. But it is going to explode. And if we don't do something very fast, your 5 years is going to be actually 5 months.
Yes. Yes. Maurits, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, the official population figure stands at 55 million in South Africa. However, if you take cell phone records and you take consumption of grain in South Africa, it rather points to 100 million people.
Well, yes, and you know, I've been saying this for a while, Maurice, that the figures that census was taken, if I'm not mistaken, in the early 2000s. That last census, that people work on those figures.
Okay.
And so they're still working on the figure of 4.5 million white South Africans. That cannot be, because by the government's own admission, 1 million families have left South Africa. So you reduce that 4.5 million to 3.5 million. And you cannot tell me that 3.5 million, consisting of half old people and half children, had bred so fast that they replaced that million that left. So the official figures are absolute garbage, and we all work on them. But if you also look at the figures of how many illegals in South Africa, it's something like 30 million. So you take their 70 million population, add 30 million, and we're looking at 100 million. Which is much more realistic, and more coming in every day. And more whites being killed, and more whites trying to leave, and more whites leaving. So your white figure is not 4.5 million. I'm sorry, I dispute that.
Yes, those are facts. It's facts that both of you are quoting. Cell phone use, the amount of SIM cards used. Now, okay, you can presuppose maybe to say that the average person has 3 or 4 or 5 SIM cards.
You make those connections, of course.
Yes, but even if you do that, you come to an astounding number of SIM cards issued to devices in South Africa. Now, who's owning all those devices? Are those really the poorest of the poor sitting in the vast squatter camps? I cannot suppose that. No. I cannot suppose that. So where are all these devices, electronic devices, communication devices? Who owns them?
Yeah.
And it's very true what Merwe is saying about this. Karen, yes, and your numbers and your figures. Now, I hold a different point of view, and I based that on earlier studies. I think it was by the World Bank that came to the conclusion that there cannot be only 5 million or 4.5 million white South Africans in South Africa. They came to a figure at that point in time. It was the late 90s, the late 80s, of more than 7 million white people. There's actual numbers saying that there are more white people in South Africa at that stage than there was supposed to have been white people. So if you start to calculate from let's say 6 million white people in South Africa, we split it to 6 million, and you lose 1 million families. A million families will be, let's say, three people per family, very small family. That's about 3 million people or 4 million people out of the country. We come to 3 million again, the number that you're.
Yes.
So it's a very strange. It's once again this twilight zone that we are living in, where solidarity, the trade union solidarity, coming out to say. But in our studies, we're finding that white schools, the old white schools, there's not enough of them, and there's overpopulation of white children. I don't know where they come up with that number.
No.
I really no. I see it as propaganda. And there's probably a reason for that propaganda, but I'm not going to dwell in this program on it. We're going to explore those things in a later program, and I'm going to rip people because, once again, everybody will hate me, but it needs to be ripped open and shown to the world what's going on, actually. But it's very strange, this twilight zone that we are living in, where we are being told as white South Africans, and this is why the white liberals still believe it, that everything is actually fine in South Africa. It's not really that bad, but it is that bad. It's even worse than bad. And people need to start to realize that. And this is not being pessimistic about things and negative about it. It's simply realistic. It's simply being realistic, because if we don't know the source of the problem, we can never fix the problem.
No.
And that is what it's my life to go to what the problem is, so that we can solve it.
Yes, because you have to. You have to. I always said when I was a boss, don't come to me with a problem. Come to me with a problem and a couple of solutions. Because otherwise you're just telling me something I already know. So come to me with a solution. And really, there is no stupid solution. You can say, okay, that won't work because of X, Y, and Z, but it might lead you in a different direction from what you were thinking. So there is no stupid solution to be given. Just let's put our heads together and solve this school problem before more darling, innocent, just starting out, precious little lives are lost.
Yes, exactly, Karen. Merwe, from your side, I think we're coming very close to the end of this program. But from your side, any remarks you still want to make?
No, Schalk. The thing is just that parents, and me as a grandparent with a child at school, already, a grandchild at school, we will just have to take this thing and act very, very fast.
Yeah, I foresee huge problems coming from this. It's so scary. You practically had me speechless while you were describing the problem, because it is hard for me to believe that a country would allow that, because school and education is the most important and most critical aspect of any nation's future. And if we are sending our children to death traps, I don't know what we're trying to do or what the end game is going to be, but we have to do something about it.
Yes, definitely. Karen, in the last few minutes that we have to our availability, something other happened that I think is extremely significant this week, and it falls very strangely into place with the schools crisis that come up now. And that was that South Africa was formally warned by 5 big major nations, themselves amongst others being the US and Germany, they were warned on a series of issues relating to economy, relating to corruption, and the governments of state. Now, it was reported after that it was not withdrawn, but it was muted a little bit, and there was apology that maybe it was not done through the correct channels, which is fine. I'm a lawyer. Sometimes you do things not procedurally correct, but the merits, the substance is still correct. It's a significant thing that happened in this week where foreign governments, 5 of them, amongst others also Switzerland, now that is also very significant. Very significant. Switzerland came out to South Africa and said formally, you are making a hash up. If you go on this path, we cannot support you anymore. You're making a hash up. Now, that's unprecedented in the South African history. I can't recall any other stage, even during the apartheid years, where something as explicit as that happened.
No. And their response was pathetic. That you are colonists and you are interfering in our internal affairs, and you didn't go through the correct channel, so you don't even deserve a response. We'll call you in and chastise you. But
it was you now being imperialist against us. Switzerland has not occupied and colonized any country on earth ever. It's not colonial power in any way. So if Switzerland, the main banking focus beyond London, comes to you and say to you, you're buggering up your own economy. We cannot support that anymore. If the Swiss do that, it tells you a huge amount of what actually going on in the minds of business people around the world. Davos, where the most, and Geneva, where the most powerful people on earth relating to finance and economy is seated. If those people start telling you, we're going to withdraw from our support from you, you must listen. Not the Chinese and not the Russians, they will not be able to support you and save you in future. If the Swiss conglomerative, if I want to call it that, if they withdraw from your country, it's that. And I think it comes on the back of, in the previous week, the government coming out and saying, in muted terms, because there were mixed messages about this, but relating to the Reserve Bank in South Africa. Some messages were starting to come out, we're going to nationalize the Reserve Bank. We know if central banks are being threatened, world powers start to act on it. We don't have to go into the conspiracy theory behind it. We know exactly what's going on. But if that happens, there's movement. I put on our party page on National Conservative Party a synopsis of the message sent, and then I did something I was maybe not supposed to, because I hinted, and the hint that I threw was that they are picking a fight. And what I meant by that was that the world powers created this incident now. They are picking a fight. And we know the Americans do their things. This little fight will become a very big fight not very long from here on.
Well, so maybe we can take that up on another show, because we have 2 minutes left.
Yes. So it's both significant things that happened in South Africa this week. It's game changers. I think these 2 incidents are game changers in South Africa.
So do I, Schalk, but maybe we can go into it in greater detail on another show. So thank you, Schalk, for once again for taking over my show for me and taking care of my baby for me while I'm unable to do so. Thank you very much, Morris, for being a guest on the show and for bringing your technical expertise to shine a light on a very severe problem. God bless South Africa, God bless the USA, and God help the world we live in today. And as always, we are we're playing out with a song by called Praise Him.
Thank you, Paul.
Once I was a blind man, wandering to and fro. Once I was in sin, out of control. reach down and pick me up. Holy Spirit over me. You knocked the scales from my eyes, and now I'm